Okay, it looks like YouTube is live. We're just waiting for Facebook to go live. And there may be a bit of a delay before we see Facebook live. Waiting. All right. Nothing still on Facebook? Okay, we're live. All right. Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Matthew Schutte, and this is Will Harris-Braun. And I'm talking to you from Berlin. Will, where are you at right now?
I'm in Montreal, Canada, Quebec.
All right. And so we are doing our Q&A, number 13. So let's see. What should we start with, Will? Should we start with some announcements?
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good. All right. We obviously are in the middle of our ICO, our initial community offering, and fortunately we have blown past our initial hard cap, our initial goals. There's still plenty more work to do, but we're excited. We've got about half the time left, almost, or just a little more than that. We have a bunch of events happening this week. One of the things that our team hasn't been great about is publicizing all of the activity that's happening in our community. It's because it's often relevant to just that little area, but we've got meetups happening all over. We've got speaking gigs, we've got hackathons, etc. The first one is tonight, actually, in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta is one of our more vibrant communities. I mean, there's just a ton of folks doing really interesting things inside of that meetup community, and that's going to be at Georgia Tech. And we will add the links to all of these events in the chat on Facebook. I think we can add those in the URL or in the comments on YouTube as well. So yeah, there's an event tonight in Atlanta. Obviously, we have our live Q&A right now. We're doing an event in a couple of days in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. That's going to be a meetup. We also have a meetup or a hackathon happening there in about a week. We've got an event, some meetings. I'm going to be going to Helsinki, Finland tomorrow and doing some meetings, and then to Riga, Latvia, where we'll be doing a little workshop with a bunch of MBA students who are focused on urban design, basically urban planning, and trying to build sort of the future cities, smart cities, future cities stuff. We've got a meetup on the 17th in Pittsburgh. We've had a few of those so far. It sounds like they're getting pretty vibrant. And then another event in Vilnius, Lithuania, that same date on the 17th, as well as in San Francisco. I'll be speaking at a conference in Munich called Year of the X. This year it's Year of the Dog. We'll be doing a workshop on designing currencies that go beyond money. And that'll be on the 18th of April, so next Wednesday. That same date, there will be a meetup in Byron Bay, Australia. And then I think that puts us about a week out. So we've got there's in Amsterdam on the 21st, another meetup in San Francisco on the 25th. On the 26th, I will be in Annecy, France, kind of near Geneva, to do a meetup there with some folks. So a whole bunch of things on the docket. And I know there's actually one more that I added later, and I can't remember what it was. But yeah, lots of stuff there. Will, do you want to jump in for whatever's next?
Yeah, sure. That's really cool to see just how many meetups there are all around the world, and meetups and events and hackathons, and even like so much that they're overlapping on the same days. Yeah, I'll say a little bit about actually a meetup that we had here in Montreal a couple days ago. It was a community organized meetup at this really wonderful space, and it just turned out that me and Eric from also from the team were around, so we showed up also, and it was kind of by accident, and it was just such a wonderful group of people really interested in Holochain and Holo and learning about everything, and a lot of them kind of didn't have a lot of an idea what it was beforehand, but they're really open to learning about it, and it was really cool. And afterwards, the space we were in, we had to get out by 9, but a bunch of us just went off to the office space of an organization nearby and kept just talking like late into the night. It was just a really wonderful time with a bunch of great people. Yeah, so it's like a nice little story, and we made some really cool connections.
Yeah, one thing I'll say from the road, just to drop a couple of anecdotes. So I've been on this, community building tour in Europe, and my title on the team is Director of Communications, but that's kind of misleading because I basically run around speaking. That's mostly what I do, is I go and chat with meetups and speak at conferences and things like that. So
Looks like you're breaking up a little, Matt.
Okay. I will kill my video for just a minute, see if that can help. So hopefully that's better. I've been running around, and the kind of community that I've been interacting with is exactly like you were talking about, Will. It's lots of developers, it's social change folks, people who are interested in new forms of organization, lots of people interested in community currency designs, academics that are interested in different ways of structuring economics, more complex currency systems, etc. And so it's been a really fun experience. And in lots of these places, like you said, before I even get there, there's a bunch of folks excited and interested and kind of getting ready to do their own thing. And so me showing up just helps to kind of pull a bunch of people together. And then hopefully they continue. Not every one of those cities has a meetup going yet. In particular, I was really excited about the communities that I got to meet with in Romania. Romania has incredible internet speeds, really solid education, lots of developers, but a lot of issues in terms of infrastructure, in terms of government. There's a ton of problems. And so it felt to me like, wow, this community is going to be one of those places where Holochain just takes off like wildfire, because there's problems that need solving, people who have the skill sets needed to actually build some applications and things. And it just felt like, wow, this is going to be something where you're going to come back in 2 years and it's going to be a different world. All right. That said, I'm going to see if I can turn the video back on. So we are in the middle of the ICO. I want to start with a couple of things because I think there's a lot of folks in the community, or a lot of folks that might be watching this or will watch this soon, who are new to Holochain and new to Holo. And I want to try to make a couple of things very visible so that they're not confusing and murky, etc. We have two projects. We have Holochain and we have Holo. Holochain is an approach, it's a pattern for how to build new peer-to-peer applications. That means these are applications that you run just using the devices of the users themselves. They operate on my phone and Will's laptop and somebody else's desktop, etc. And there's no web servers needed. There's no mining, like blockchain world style, needed. There's no cryptocurrency required. In a Holochain application, every party shows up as a peer, and they show up as both a user and a host. So they're always a full node. That's the structure of a Holochain app as is, right? That's the way it works. We're giving that away to the world for free. Holochain is not doing an ICO. There's no hardware required for Holochain. You run it on your own devices. It's a software approach. It's almost like HTML, right? You don't buy HTML. It's a thing that you use. And as long as people are using that same pattern, great, they can speak with one another. That's Holochain. We're giving it away to the world for free because we're trying to change the world. We're kind of like a bunch of hippies who are really trying to shift how humans can communicate and coordinate. Separate from that is Holo. Now, Holo is our first big Holochain application. We're calling it our flagship app. It itself is a Holochain app. So it's a distributed application. It's run by the users themselves. And Holo basically builds a bridge back to the existing web. So if you've created some Holochain application, the example I often like to use is of a peer-to-peer home sharing, house rental, room rental business, something like Airbnb. Right? So you have some community that sets up an alternative to Airbnb. They're running this on their own devices. It operates the way they want it to operate. It could be that they were pissed off about the fees that Airbnb takes, but it very well might be that they just wanted to be able to talk to customers before those customers actually can book a room, right? Airbnb kind of blocks that sort of stuff. So great, you've got this peer-to-peer application. It works the way you want it to work. But in order to interact with it, you'd have to, each person who wants to book a room would have to install the app and run it, right? They'd have to become a peer. Holo makes it so that that's not the case. Holo makes it so that members of that community can basically serve out websites to visitors so that anybody can open their laptop, open a browser, type in the URL. It could be ourbnb.co. And then they get back a website. That website's being served by the members of that community. That enables anybody in the world to book those rooms. That's useful to that community, right? They want visitors to be able to book rooms. It's useful because it reduces the friction. It basically removes all the friction of having to adopt some new technology. So if my uncle wanted to book a room, he doesn't even have to realize that he's using a Holochain app. He's not really. He's visiting a Holochain app, right? But that, for us, is really important because it enables these new applications to get built, work the way that the people want them to work, and not have them make the sacrifice of being on their own little island with nobody else to play with. Right? So that's the basic gist. When people do that web hosting, it's not just out of the goodness of their heart. It can be, but they can also go, I want to get paid, and here's my rate. And when they do that web hosting, the developer of that application or the community as a whole pays them for the work that they're doing and making it easy for visitors to come visit the app. When they pay them in our cryptocurrency, Holo Fuel. It's a really efficient cryptocurrency that's optimized for high volume, millions and millions, possibly billions of transactions, and microtransactions. Even if those things are worth, a penny or a few pennies, great. This works. It makes sense to process the payment using that cryptocurrency. Our business model for Holo is that we take a transaction fee. For fostering all of this interaction, for fostering this whole ecosystem of web hosting, we're asking to take 1% or less as a transaction fee. And that's the business that we're launching. That is actually being used to subsidize the larger Holochain ecosystem, to build out and mature the protocols, et cetera, for Holochain. But that's basically the overview. The ICO that we're running is for Holo. It's for this web hosting business. Sometimes people will go, well, really? Web hosting? Is that big a deal? And it's like, yeah, it's a really big deal, actually. Most human communication goes through web servers today, right? And if you think about it, Amazon is one of the largest companies on the planet. Their CEO, wealthiest guy on the planet. One of their big divisions is called Amazon Web Services, and it's basically a web hosting business. It's for hosting and serving applications and web pages. Amazon Web Services accounts for 10% of their revenues, but it accounts for more profits than the entire rest of Amazon combined. So you can think about the web hosting business as Amazon's cash cow. And you can think about what Holo is trying to do is basically do to Amazon's cash cow what Uber did to taxis. We're trying to make it so that anybody who has computing capacity on their laptop, on their desktop, etc., can get into that cloud computing business, and we can basically make use of the idle assets that exist in all of our homes and businesses around the world. And we're trying to use that to bootstrap a much more human-friendly internet. We're trying to basically use that to build the bridge into this whole new world of peer-to-peer applications that put the user at the center. All right, that was a bit of a diatribe, but I've found that in the past, a lot of folks they're not aware of those differences and what it is that we're selling and what it is that we're giving away. So I wanted to make that clear. A couple of other announcements before we dive into the questions. Please, if you haven't already done so and you are outside the US, China, and South Korea, check out our ICO. We'd love to have you participate in it. It helps us get this all off the ground. We have reached our minimum already, so we know we're going to be able to launch this thing. But the better funded this gets, the faster these things come, and the more mature the ecosystem is going to be early on. So you can participate now. Go to holo.host/ICO for details. You'll need to go through a whitelisting process, and our ICO is occurring on Ethereum. We're using an ERC20 token, but all those details are at holo.host. It's holo.host/ICO. In addition to that, join our Telegram channel. Will, it's t.me/channel Holo. Is that right? CHANNELHOLO. And we will add a link in Facebook and YouTube as well. We actually need more folks in our Telegram channel because we had not been building up a Telegram channel. We'd been building up a community, and most of our communication was happening in our online chat space, chat.holochain.org. But for folks who are really having questions about the ICO, they want to know more about this, Telegram is the place where we're trying to direct all of those conversations at the moment, so that we can sort of handle them all. And if you are interested in building applications and things like that, please ask those questions there as well. Right now, a lot of the questions in that channel are really geared towards ICO stuff, but we'd love to have the bigger picture stuff and the visions that you're wanting to make real in the world visible there too. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Will for a moment.
So yeah, like Matt said, join our Telegram. It's really a neat place in there. I think it's from what I've heard, it's pretty different than a lot of other like ICO Telegram channels. There's like a lot of really constructive conversations going on in there. People really, honing their understanding of what we're doing in our projects, and it's pretty small, I think, compared to a lot of what people expect. There's about 650, 670 people in there, but it's a really nice place, and it's especially cool to see people who aren't on the team but are really interested in what we're doing start to then gain an understanding and then start to answer questions for newer people. That's really wonderful to see, and it's always nice to have a little help for us who are answering questions in there from the team, but it's also really uplifting to see people who care about the project so much that they're actually answering new people's questions. That's really wonderful.
Will, can you give a few shout outs to folks on both Telegram and Mattermost who have been really amazing about helping answer other people's questions?
Of course, yeah. There's a gentleman named Frederick on Telegram who has just been absolutely wonderful in answering people's questions. It's really nice because Frederick's in Australia, I believe, somewhere. So when I go to sleep and I'm no longer answering those questions, Frederick's available and answering questions. So we kind of double team that. It's really wonderful. And on the Mattermost, a person named Brooks has been for a long time really great about answering questions and spurring really deep and really good conversations. I really appreciate them. And a fellow named Paul Doust on the Mattermost as well has been in a similar position, really contributing in a way that I wouldn't expect from anyone not on the team, basically, from anyone who's just part of the community and passionate about this, but it's just absolutely wonderful to see. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also folks, I think those three in particular are great about somebody coming in and going, hey, I don't understand this. And they go, here, and they're able to just guide them through. We also have people who are really leveling up the conversation in various contexts. Life Smith, Dill Green, Greg Cassell. I mean, there's a bunch of these folks who pop rocks. We've got a quantum physicist, or not quantum physicist, quantum computing PhD candidate who's excited about what we can do with Holo and quantum computers, which I have a hard time wrapping my head around, but I'm glad that he's in there. So yeah, yay, all of them. All right, let's get to some questions. Michael says, when is the next California or Oregon hackathon? Do we have a hackathon? I know we've got some meetups, but do we have a hackathon scheduled in either of those places that you know of, Will?
No, that's not in my mind space. But definitely meetups are, I mean, they're not a hackathon, but they're close. You could potentially go to a meetup, find someone that you would like to develop an app with, or and do that.
And my basic formula for how to get to a hackathon is you host a meetup. You host a meetup, and then you do a second meetup, and then you do a third meetup, and within that second or third, hopefully you're starting to play with building some applications together. And then after a few of those, you do a weekend hackathon, because people have got enough skills and they've wrapped their heads around the slightly different way that distributed applications actually work, right? Because it's a pretty big mental shift. And once you get there, you can go, oh my gosh, you could solve these crazy problems. Like, there are wicked problems that you can solve. But going straight from, hey, what's Holochain, to a hackathon, you're going to spend a lot of that hackathon going over the very things that you would want to do in a meetup.
Looks like Matt's a little frozen, so we will go to another question. Anita Halcyon asks, can applications built elsewhere be used around the world eventually? I think this question is asking about kind of the development of applications and how those can spread. And I think the way we've set up not only our community, but also our actual technology, and the way we're helping applications to be built is very conducive to this kind of spread of technology and applications throughout all over the world. The open source community is really notorious for people from all walks of life and all locales joining in and working on not only developing applications together, but also sharing them together. And we're deeply rooted in the open source community. Holochain is completely open source. And Matt, did you want to say something? Oh, okay.
Great. So next up, will there always be a Holo fuel transaction fee taken by Holo? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I can't. Right now, we've set it at 1% or less. I would anticipate that for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the case for Holo. But Holo is not all of Holochain. Holo is a specific service, and so if people are choosing to use that service, they can. That said, you can use Holo and not necessarily, there are ways to avoid that transaction fee, I guess would be the way to frame it. The way to avoid the transaction fee is not to send Holo fuel, to recognize someone else's contribution through some other mechanism. Like, hey, this guy is amazing. He's an elite member of our community. He's been donating computing power to Wikipedia or whatever that service is. So we've actually kind of built in some mechanisms for enabling communities, applications, et cetera, to create their own community currencies if they need to. Now, whether that currency will be recognized by others is a different story. And so we expect Holo fuel will be recognized widely in the community. Whether you are an elite member of Wikipedia, that may give you access to different opportunities, but it might not operate quite so much like a transactional currency. It may end up being something more like a reputation currency. But there are mechanisms that you can use if you're really desperate to avoid the 1%. That said, even at 1%, this is far cheaper than almost any other payment processing platform out there. So we think it's pretty fair. But again, you don't need to pay that 1% to do anything on Holochain. This is only if you're using Holo. So if you're running a Holochain application, you might build and run that app with just your friends. We may never even know about the app, let alone have any way to charge you or anything for it. So these are truly peer-to-peer applications. It's when you're using the service of Holo and you're paying people for having done web hosting, that's where we take a transaction fee for having facilitated that flow of value.
And that transaction fee it's not like we're not doing that because we want the money. It's actually like Matthew said, it's not only because we've facilitated that, but it's because Holo as an organization is continuing to facilitate that by providing like DNS resolution and things like that, infrastructure that Holo as an organization actually maintains to keep those transactions and that method of distributed hosting running.
Yeah, just to frame that a slightly different way, there's no way for us to grow and mature and maintain this system if it doesn't have some way of the value that it is creating to feed back in and support it, right? And so just to make very visible, we need to create 100 times as much value as we extract. That's our business model. We think we can do it because we're using a distributed architecture, which means we don't have to build giant warehouses of web servers, right? But we're basically a catalyst. We're wanting that catalyst to work well on an ongoing basis.
So
all right.
There's been a little clarification to this question we're answering right now that I just saw. It says, to the prior question about transaction fee, I mean, once the network is self-sustaining, will Holo remove the transaction fee and let the network continue to run itself? And what I read in here is the expectation that the network will be self-sustaining at some point. And I think what that actually means for the way that we've planned the Holo and Holochain sort of timeline and ecosystem is that the point at which the network is self-sustaining is the point at which Holo becomes obsolete, and enough people are using Holochain natively, and Holochain is easy enough to use natively that there's not that need for that bridge that Matthew was talking about of people needing to access Holochain apps through a web browser because accessing them through Holochain is
so, yeah. So that's going to be years out, just to be very clear, like maybe decades. But another way to frame this is we anticipate there still being fees. If you're using Holo, there's still going to be fees. However, Holo is an unusual organization because even right from the beginning, we're going to be doing something like our community controlling 1 to 3% of our revenues. And over time, we're actually handing over control of all of those revenues to the community. So this is a mechanism for enabling the community to decide what kinds of things do we want to make better. Do we want to improve languages? Do we want to improve educational materials? Do we want to add infrastructure? Do we want to do a new security audit on something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so that's our path forward. But no, we're not planning to make it. It would almost be like once Matt gets up and running, if I was a child, once I got to the point where I could walk, are we going to cut Matthew off from food and oxygen? No, because then I would not be able to walk anymore, right? A system needs flows in order to support itself. And this is a system that is the kind of flow that we've set up. All right, Thomas says, I've got a question concerning the Holo fuel creation process. Can you maybe describe the dynamic coin supply approach in more detail? Will, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can go into it a little. So the important thing to remember is that Holo fuel is not a token and it's not a coin. It's, from what we can tell, a completely new way of doing cryptocurrency. It's a mutual credit crypto accounting system. So, and this stems from the way that we look at computing as a whole, which is also a new way of doing that, which is which is called agent-centric computing, and an agent-centric architecture and point of view. And right now, almost everything is in contrast to that data-centric. So it's based on the assumption and the agreement that data is something and it exists. And we like to look at it in a different way, that data is an experience experienced by agents, and a lot of the time a shared experience by many agents and agreed upon. So that's what an agent-centric architecture sounds like, and we believe that's kind of more the way the world works in general. So for Holofuel, it's not a coin and it's not a token, because coins and tokens are really manifestations of this data-centric architecture that almost everybody is kind of thinking in, that there's such a thing as a coin, which is it's not a real object, obviously, because it's digital, but it may as well be. It's one thing. You can pass it from one person to the other. You can either destroy it, or you can create it, and that's it. And everybody has to agree on it. And kind of the agent-centric version of this is mutual credit, in our opinion. And a mutual credit currency works like this. So everyone has a balance, and it starts at zero, and it can go negative or it can go positive. And if you're negative, it doesn't mean you're in debt and you have negative of something. It just means your balance is negative, and that's okay most of the time. So if I have a balance of zero, Matthew has a balance of zero because we just started out, and Matthew has some rice, and I'm hungry, so I need some rice. We would make a transaction, and my balance would go down the amount that I'm paying Matthew, and his balance would go up the same amount. So in the system of me and Matthew, our balances are still total to zero. The sum of them is still zero because mine's negative and his is positive, the same amount. And so that's a mutual credit currency, and we've kind of combined that with the crypto sphere to make this mutual credit crypto accounting system. So that's the basics of Holofuel. So it's very different than a coin or a token. Matthew, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit of detail on how the currency supply will function once this thing's all live. So who's able to issue currency now? Only one party, our organization, right? So as we're doing this ICO, what's happening is we're going negative, and whoever's purchasing the Holofuel or Holo tokens, which will be redeemable for Holofuel, they're going positive, right? And so when we launch this whole thing, there will be a bunch of other folks with smaller and bigger positive account balances, and then our organization with a giant negative balance, right? It's demonstrating how much funding we had brought in, how negative our balance is. Now, as people start transacting back and forth, and we start charging 1% transaction fees, that will sort of slowly eat its way back up. At the same time, let's say Marcus is a host, and he's got a handful of holoports, or he's got a server running in his house or whatever, and he's been doing a really solid job hosting. He's built up a bit of a reputation around being able to provide web pages very quickly, so very low latency, and he's always online. He never has downtime, right? And so he's got this solid reputation. And if demand for Holofuel goes up, if people are wanting to purchase more because they're wanting to do more web hosting, if that demand goes up and the price starts to rise, Marcus might decide, I'm going to pre-sell some of my hosting. And he becomes able to issue currency, right? Issue his own Holofuel, essentially, probably at a slightly lower rate, because he'll have a slightly different reputation than we will. His asset that he's issuing is backed by the computing power that he has demonstrated he can put into the network. And so he will add that currency supply, essentially, which then brings the price back down. So this dynamic supply of currency really has to do with people being able to go, hey, I'm willing to sell something at a slightly cheaper rate, or no, I want to charge more. And because of that capacity, we're able to have a supply breathe alongside demand. And it's one of the things that we think that it's one of the things that we designed to make it so that our price will eventually settle. It won't be static, but it should become somewhat stable. Now, we don't think it's going to become somewhat stable anywhere near where what we're selling it at right now. Just because we don't think that's where the market will rest. Just to make visible for those who aren't familiar, we're selling Holo basically 10,000 times cheaper than Ethereum. So the same amount of computing capacity that you could get on Ethereum for 10,000 euros, you're going to be able to get with us for €1 is the basic promise. And we think we're overcharging. We think that for that €1, you're not going to get the same computing power. That's what we're promising as an organization. But as soon as our community steps in to start creating a peer-to-peer marketplace of this stuff, we think the price is going to go far, far lower, because the system that we've designed is actually way more efficient than 10,000 times. It's more like 100,000 or 1,000,000 times more efficient. Arthur pointed out the other day, if people were doing hosting with a Holo port run at half capacity and they were actually getting paid the full amount of the rate that we're setting, they would make something like $500,000 a day, right? That's crazy. That's not some ridiculous amount. That's never going to happen. Just to be very clear, that's not going to happen. Very quickly, the market's going to come in and bring the price of compute down to a reasonable level, which means you're going to actually be able to buy a lot more computing capacity. So our expectation is that we're selling this thing at a discount, right? We're selling it at a particular rate. We recognize that our community is going to be able to step in and provide more capacity than we are promising to deliver at the same rate. But that eventually that will find a sort of a stable equilibrium that the market sets. And by making it so that we have this dynamic currency supply, that prevents there from being big spikes in the price volatility.
Yeah, so as Matthew was saying, as that price of compute goes down, that actually means that the value of the Holo fuel currency goes up, which is something that some people don't quite get, but that's the dynamic.
Yeah, too many crossing lines, right? So if you could buy a gigabyte worth of storage on Ethereum today, for 10,000 euros, you can buy a gigabyte worth of storage from Holo for €1. But once our system goes live, that €1 isn't going to get you a gigabyte. It might get you a terabyte, right? Or 100 gigabytes or 10 gigabytes, right? But you'll be getting more for your money is the basic gist.
So that's a prediction, of course, but it's so we can't guarantee it, but it's also how we've designed the system to work.
You can go on to holo.host. There's a section on create where we've got our benchmarking tests. And we'll be adding a little video shortly that walks through how we did those benchmarking tests. That'll talk through why we think we're so much more efficient than Ethereum. If you're geeky, you can go run those tests yourself or look at the code and the write-up. If you're not geeky, you can at least look at the write-up. James says, it would be great if you had an infographic to represent the mutual system. Awesome. Thanks for the suggestion, James. We'll work on creating something like that.
This is actually cool. A while back, I was working on exactly that, and I got sidetracked. But yeah, it's definitely in the brain.
Maybe a Prezi, right? Because these things are dynamic, or a video. Chad Green says, when can we start using our devices? For Holo and Holo ports, we'll be shipping those in a few months' time is our anticipation. After the software is ready. So right now we're doing the ICO to get the funding to finish building out the software. Once that software is live, we will put that onto the Holo ports and they will ship. And only once the Holo ports ship will we make that software available to other folks to be able to run on other devices. So we'll be shipping and launching an alpha hopefully within a few months. Is that right, Will?
Yeah, it's not quite clear the exact schedule at this point because of some delays we've had and such, but we'll definitely keep everyone updated on our Indiegogo page about the dates of that and the progress. And yeah, it's not going to take years and years. So But so your question is, when can we start using our devices? That's for Holo. That was Matt's answer for Holo. For Holochain, if you want to run Holochain in its alpha version, you can do that today, right now. On our GitHub is github.com/holochain, and you can go and look at all the apps and the core and download it and run it. Yep.
Yeah, and we've had, because of all the meetups and hackathons that we've had, as well as the applications that people on the team are building, we've got quite a few apps out there. I mean, they're early, right? It's a nascent ecosystem, but we've got everything from a peer-to-peer library application, where we had a person at a hackathon, Victor Saunders, who lives in a village of 900 people, not enough people to have a library, but lots of folks have books. Right? So he came up with an application that enables people to make visible what the books are that they have, and then enables others to request to borrow them, to log that it's been borrowed, to say, hey, I'm returning it, to say, yes, it got returned, etc., to be able to do the accounting, the tracking of this peer-to-peer lending library, basically. I can see that architecture getting used for all kinds of things, right? I remember when I went to law school at UC Berkeley, and when I was first checking out the school, I had this vision not too long before that of, wow, what if we didn't just loan books? We could also loan tools and things like that. And I was really excited when I saw in Oakland, as I was driving by on my way home from Berkeley, they had a tool lending library, right? Because I was like, oh my goodness. And when I went there, I actually used that tool lending library a lot. I built all kinds of things during my time living in Berkeley and Oakland. And I was able to do that because I didn't have to go buy a $500 tool just because I wanted to use it once. And so these sorts of sharing economy systems, I think we'll see a bunch of those pop up pretty quickly. We've also got messaging applications like our peer-to-peer version of Twitter, Clutter. We're working on a peer-to-peer version of Slack. We're hoping that becomes not just a peer-to-peer version of Slack. We want that to be actually much more interesting and powerful. But we can dive into that stuff more later. Okay, you've given rough predictions on the value of future Holo fuel relative to compute/hosting value and ETH. But what about the future value relative to traditional fiat currencies? How will it move relative to them when the network stabilizes and gets more efficient? Or will it be stable relative to them? I don't think we can make predictions. I don't think we can make solid predictions on that without getting ourselves into trouble. I do believe that my belief is, hey, if you can do really powerful stuff in this system, it's going to attract a lot more activity. And as a result, it will become more valuable. Right now, a lot of what's driving the price in cryptocurrencies is speculation. But what usually generates the value in an asset is its utility value, right? Is that, wow, you can get a lot of use out of this. And as people start to be able to get a lot more use out of Holo fuel and the Holo system, we think it will increase in value. Sorry if this question is out of place. Would it be possible for DAOs to exist and operate in Holochain? Will, you're smirking. You want to take that one?
I am smirking, yes. I was smirking because, sort of out of joy, because it's a DAO has already been written on Holochain. The most prominent benchmark that Matthew was talking about earlier, that you can find by going to github.com/holochain/benchmarks, I believe, and also on the website, like he said, the most prominent benchmark that we use to compare Ethereum's compute to Holochain's compute was a DAO. Eric, one of the core devs of Holochain, wrote a DAO equivalent on Holochain. It's kind of different because the architecture of Holochain is so different and rooted in such a different way of thinking. But he kind of transferred that way of the same application of a DAO to the Holochain way of thinking, the Holochain architecture, and it's not probably secure to use, and it's not fully fleshed out with the UI and everything, but it's absolutely good enough to, like, as a proof of concept and as a benchmark between Holochain and the Ethereum compute.
Yeah, and the not secure to use has to do with we're still in alpha. We haven't done our security audits yet, right?
Yeah.
So we're working on our beta at the moment, and we're planning to do security audits and all of that as part of our maturation process this summer in the lead up to the launch of Holo. We need the underlying holochain architecture to be really robust and solid, just for our own needs, right? We don't want to be running a currency system on something that's not bomber, but everybody else gets to benefit from that too, because it's open source and we're sharing it with all with the world.
But that's a great question, Danilo. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One other thing to note is, though it's not a distributed autonomous organization, almost every holochain application you can think of it as a smart contract, right? It could be a really rich and robust smart contract, but these are, by their architecture, holochain applications are distributed applications that solve a lot of the problems that people were wanting to solve and got excited about solving with smart contracts, and Ethereum in particular. Again, as Will mentioned, slightly different approach because of the agent-centric nature, but that slightly different approach we think actually gives us far greater scale, speed, better cost, far more efficient, and most importantly, far more adaptable. If somebody comes up with some new way of cheating, the community is able to fluidly respond and counter that sorts of failure. So we think that that's a big difference from the existing blockchain landscape. All right, Yaroslav says, does Holochain currently support timer functionality? For instance, firing an event at a certain time like Cron does. Hey, we got Eric Harris-Braun on the call. Eric, what do you think? Does Holochain currently support timer functionality? This is actually an interesting question.
Yeah, and Will just hollered at me, so I'm not prepared at all to answer. But let me say, let me think about it. Okay, so timer functionality. So every node is running on a system, and it's running in some kind of virtual machine environment. Like it'll be, I mean, in the alphas that we have right now, it's a Lisp or a JavaScript one. And so whatever that virtual machine environment provides in terms of time, that's local to that machine, you have that, but that's not going to fire off an event that you can run. So we've talked about the issue of time, and this is something that we need to deal with and inject into the system events that fire on time. But the initial ones will be related to the local time of the local machine. So just to make sure that you don't think that there's going to be some kind of global coherent time, because that's one of the things that doesn't exist. But we will be putting in some kind of time services, and also things like we want to make sure that when you're in the validation process, that you can know that something happened within a time frame, an expected time frame distance approximately between nodes. So there will be some kinds of support for that, but they're currently not in place.
Thanks. And I'll just point out that it's not just that global time doesn't exist in Holochain. Eric's point there is global time doesn't exist, period. Einstein figured this out 100 years ago with the general theory of relativity, et cetera. There's special theory of relativity and then the general theory of relativity. There is no such thing as absolute time, which is what makes distributed computing one of the more interesting and complicated things to play with.
Right, but this particular question is about firing off events, and so certainly we will have mechanisms in place for firing off events on local machines based on local time, but not based on any global time, at least to start with. I do think that it'll be very interesting for people to put together time applications that send out signals that say it's approximately this time, and so that there can be synchronization events that happen as part of an application. That would be like a whole holochain application that you would bridge to get that kind of synchronization event if you needed it in your application. But we're putting that at the sort of application level, or as we've been saying, a lot of holochain applications are actually microservices that are bound together. And so that kind of synchronizing time event would end up being a microservice. All right, enjoy.
Thanks. You're welcome. Great. Just to make visible time, speaking of time, I'm gonna have to be running in exactly 10 minutes. So I don't know if Will's able to stay longer, but I'm gonna be jumping off promptly right on the hour because I have to jump on another call. Danilo says, could you elaborate on how Holochain is based on principles found in nature? And how does that relate to the larger visions of Scepter? That's a nice short question. So there's a few things, but one of the main ones that I tend to focus on is holographic storage. Now, holographic storage, that sounds like jargon. People don't know what the heck that means. It basically means that each participant holds their own state. It means that they see the world from their own perspective. They've got their own memories, and they interact with the world from that basis. So, for instance, language is stored holographically. Will has his copy of English. I have my copy or version of English. Right? It lives in each of our brains and bodies. We don't need a dictionary to be present in order to talk with one another because we're each holding on to those sets of associations. We have enough overlap between our versions of English that we can have a somewhat intelligible conversation until a guy like me throws out a word like holographic storage, in which case there's failure all over the place. We think that holographic storage is, the downside of holographic storage is that sometimes you have mistakes in communication, but the upside is pretty profound. Will can go off and try something new, and if it proves useful, he can keep doing it, and he can share it with me, and if I find that useful, I can start doing it. I can share it with somebody else, and this innovation can spread across the entire community. But the cost of doing that exploration wasn't borne by everyone. It wasn't borne by the entire community. It was local to whoever was checking that thing out. And so this is how ants explore, right? They don't have the entire colony go over there. It's how bees explore. They don't have the entire beehive go check it out. They have one at a time. When they come back, they do a little dance. They have signaling mechanisms for sharing insights about where they found something useful. So we think that holographic storage is the key to adaptive capacity, the key to changing shape, basically, and learning, because it enables the community to gain the most experience, to get the maximum amount of learning in context for the minimum amount of risk, right? You don't have to risk catastrophic failure in order to go see if there's some pollen over there if you're a honeybee. So that's one principle. The way that we're doing data storage mirrors that, this agent-centric perspective, each agent holding on to its own history, not having to agree with everybody else about what is true. It's holding on to what they've seen and then having some backup mechanisms. Having some backup mechanisms for others to be able to get access to information, even if a user is offline, etc. Another piece that we think is really critical that kind of stems out of this is that each user ends up being capable of participating in multiple applications, or in the natural world, you might describe it as they're able to pay attention to multiple signals. They've got multiple grammars. So for instance, I speak multiple grammars, meaning I'm able to hear sound and see light. And I can transform signals from sound into light, right? I can transform being capable of see over here that there's a bunk bed or something, and I can say, hey, there's a bunk bed over here. So I'm able to transform light into sound or sound into light. The light one would be by going, how many beds are in the room? And I go, 2, right? Or somebody else says that to me, and then I hold the hand up. All right, without diving into crazy details there, from our perspective, that's really interesting because we think that what it's going to mean in the application sense is that people are able to sorry, I had somebody else in the room who's also having a conversation, that people are able to have a one application that they're speaking with and another application that they're speaking with, and they're able to bridge between those two. They're able to combine them. They're able to mix the insights that they're getting from both. They don't have to have everybody else in those communities agreeing and doing it exactly the same way they are. And so this is a really different approach to computing and computer networks. We think it's going to enable a lot more flexibility. And basically, we think it's going to enable communities that learn from experience far better. All right, that's a long one. Okay, what else? Are your new developers coming from non-blockchain community or switching from Ethereum? Will, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And the answer is resoundingly both. And here's some examples. So one of our core devs for Holochain and on our team members, Nicholas Luck, he describes himself as a former blockchain enthusiast. He was really interested in writing code. He's a coder. He was interested in writing code on the blockchain and on Ethereum. And
he actually wrote our smart contracts on Ethereum.
Yeah, he's the one who wrote our smart contracts. And he discovered Holochain and figured out that what he was trying to do on blockchain wouldn't work. And now he's a Holochain enthusiast. And yeah, he's on the team. So yeah, there are lots of people, lots more than that also, switching from sort of blockchain development to and getting interested in Holochain and working on that. And at the same time, there are lots of people that are either, that are from the non-blockchain community, developers from the non-blockchain community discovering Holochain and starting to use it, and even non-developers discovering Holochain and starting to use it. We had someone at a recent hackathon who was not a developer, and they wanted to make an app, and they just, with a little help from, I believe this was in Australia, with a little help from the community and the people at the hackathon, they made a proof of concept app in that couple days without having programming experience. So that's kind of a contrast with Holochain. Developing apps is using either JavaScript or I guess Lisp if you want, but it's using programming languages that are common and with lots of documentation, and they're easy. Whereas a lot of blockchain development is pretty difficult and hard to get into. And we've had a lot of feedback that really, actually just yesterday, 2 days ago, one of the people I met in Montreal was talking about this also, about how it was surprising to him how easy it was to develop on Holochain. So yeah, so the answer is non-blockchain developers, blockchain developers, and even non-developers in some cases.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I'm not much of a developer, but it's easy enough for me to even be able to build. And we have had some other folks who are sort of like, I don't know. And it's actually fairly straightforward. There are things that are new, but the development part is pretty straightforward. And a big shout out to Connor Turlin, as well as Anders, Amat, and some of the other folks who've been working on documentation for a while. We've put a lot of effort into making it easier for people to build, and we're continuing to do that. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to start and go from, what is this, to, whoa, I've built something pretty quickly.
Matt, do you want to give just like a one-sentence teaser answer before things wrap up to this question about DAO Stack here?
Sure. So Danilo said, holographic storage, nice. I wonder, what are your thoughts on holographic consensus explored in the project DAO Stack, and also the writings of Michael Talbot, or yeah, I think that's how you pronounce that. I don't have much to say about holographic consensus. I've had some conversations recently with Matan Field from DAO Stack. Big fan, very aligned with us in terms of the kinds of things that he and his teams have been trying to build, in terms of trying to create tools that enable new forms of organization. When last time we talked, we had a little bit of a, he's like, yeah, you guys are just doing something different. You're not doing consensus. I'm like, that's true. We're not doing consensus. He's like, but I think consensus is needed for certain things. And I'm like, I don't know I don't know if global consensus is needed for anything, but consensus at some level, right? A group of folks coming into alignment, I totally see that as needed. So those are like those are like little tiny differences of opinion amongst people who are very, very closely aligned. So I think that's just we'll see. And I think that they're going to build tools, and we're going to build tools, and Hashgraph's building tools, and IPFS is building tools, and Orchid's building tools, and these tools are going to get used together. They're going to get mixed and recombined, and people are going to build cool stuff. All right. Before I jump, and I do have to jump right now, Telegram. If you have not already done so, please go join our Telegram channel. It is t.me/channel Holo. Will, can you spell that out for them?
Yes. https:// as usual. t.me/channel HOLO. That's t.me/channel Holo. It's a really fun time. Come join us.
Jump in there, say hi, ask a question. We'll give some answers. Thank you so much, all. I'm jumping. Take care.
I will too. Thanks.